Hey everybody, it's Matthew here from Losing Bait on YouTube and losingbait.com. Today, forget about the mess battner. Today I'm going to be calling the Florida Fishery and hopefully being able to reach somebody and getting maybe some answers that some of y'all might be curious to know, like why you can't go to, say, a canal in Florida and catch yourself a bass and then take it home and keep it as a pet, and then find out a couple months later that this fish is like too much for you to take care of, and you decide that you want to try to release it back into that same canal where you caught it at, right? So I'm gonna try to reach out to this guy, and he'll probably be able to shed some light on that for a lot of y'all, because I know a lot of people are actually scared to call these people. For what reason, I don't know, because it's not a crime for you to ask questions and stuff like that. But for those of you that like this type of content, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel and stuff. It'll help, like, me grow my channel and stuff like that too. I'm gonna share with you my two reasons before I made this phone call. Actually, the guy's calling me back right now, so let's actually take the call. Hey, hello, is this Eric?
Yes, Matthew.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm good. So real quick, I run a YouTube channel, and I'm trying to educate my audience and stuff. So that's where I'm trying to reach out to you. And so I just want to ask if it's okay if this call is recorded.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So my main question is so a lot of people wonder why, if they were to catch, for example, like a largemouth bass and they were to keep it as a pet, why are they unable to, like, months down the road, release that to the same canal in which they caught it from?
So, as fishery managers around the state, and I'm one that manages several counties in Southwest Florida, we have concerns about people moving fish, intentionally, unintentionally, and then also trying to uphold some of our rules and our laws that restrict or flat out prohibit the movement of fish. And the reason behind that, biologically speaking, is usually genetics. We do have some distinct species of fish that we're trying to protect and preserve the genetic component of that, especially with like bass, Florida bass, largemouth bass, things of that nature. There's also disease concerns whenever fish are contained in aquarium stuff, possibly with other fish species. That opens up, a disease component to that, and then those fish being put back in the wild could spread that disease. And then just the nature of getting back to trying to keep. We have a lot of non-native species, and a lot of aquarium enthusiasts really like to have non-native species, and that's all good and fine. There's definitely several of those that they can keep, but releasing non-native species into Florida waters, or Florida waters that connect with the state of Florida waters, is basically against the law. You can't do that, and it is also against the law to stock native fish species into Florida waters without a permit from us. So that's why technically, if you're a valid freshwater fishing license holder or something exempt that allows you to catch like a bass or a bluegill or something, and you want to take that and possess that in your aquarium, that's all you can transport, as long as not breaking the bag limit or the size limit laws and things of that nature. You can have those. It's just you get caught up in the reintroduction part, which is basically an introduction of that species back into waters of the state, is where the law violation occurs, and so that's why we highly discourage that, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, it does. So my only question is what about people that may have like a private pond in like Buckingham that's not connected to any other water but on their property lines?
Sure. So let's just say you are a large landowner. You own, several hundred acres or whatever, and you have a private pond that you dug. It's not connected with waters of the state, are potentially connected to waters of the state, and you put X amount of fish species in there, then that's a different story. You can absolutely take that fish out and keep it in your aquarium and put it back in there because that's private waters. So where the rub kind of gets into is where you're talking about waters of the state or potentially connected to waters of the state. So yes, if you're a landowner owning the contiguous property all the way around the pond or whatever, it's something that you built, you own the bottom of it, it's man-made, then you can take and put back those fish as much as you want. It just where it comes into the public waters part. So that's what I immediately thought of when you said canal, because a lot of canals are part of state waters or connected or adjacent to state waters.
Right, and that's correct, that's one of the main things, because like a lot of people, they do end up getting a bass, in a canal, and a lot of them are like youngsters that think it's going to be like a fish that's going to be able to stay in a tank, say the size of like 55 gallons for the rest of its life, and then they realize, this fish is going to grow out this tank, and they're going to be in trouble soon if they don't have an alternative on what to do with this fish. So that's kind of like one of the reasons why I was mentioning a private pond, because assuming if they had a friend or a family member that had a private pond someplace out in like Buckingham or someplace that just didn't connect to any of, as you mentioned, public waters, or could even have any access to any close public waters, then they would be fine on releasing that into a private like pond or whatever property.
Yeah, the law would not apply to that particular case, again, as long as they're not breaking a possession or size limit, bag limit, that type of transportation. It really depends on the species, honestly. So the individual need to be very aware of what species they're talking about, and then again, public water versus private water. Again, the whole premise of this is try to cut down on the movement of fish. As you know, Florida has a lot of non-native species, and we don't want, obviously even native species where we have different, substocks of fish on the native side. We don't even, that we're trying to protect genetically. We want to limit any threat to that as much as possible. So that's why those laws are in place, and that's why we highly discourage people from moving fish. Again, it does boil down to the public waters versus private water scenario. So, and I think I've made the distinction between those two. So
yeah, you have.
They're kind of staying on that side of the fence or the other, so to speak, then I think they'll, that hopefully will explain it simplistic enough.
Yeah, I mean, you've already pretty much explained everything on that whole part, so hopefully that will shed some light on a lot of them, and maybe, kind of discourage a lot of them that plan to do that, maybe from keeping them, because that is a tough thing to do, because no pet shop is ever going to take a bass of any kind, likely, so it's one of those things where you're limited to having to euthanize the fish afterwards.
Right, and again, it all boils down to the specific species of fish. Some species of fish in Florida are conditional species, which means they have special rules and regulations on the possession, transportation, sale of all that. Some of them are restricted, which are even more restrictive just by the nature of the title in terms of possession, movement without permits and things of that nature. So we just kind of look at those species and how much risk they are to the environment, and whether or not it's a species like, say, for example, like piranha. That's a restricted species. We don't want anybody without a special permit possessing those things. We don't want those things transported around the state. We don't want them released into public waters of the state or any of that stuff. So there's always going to be species that we flat out just do not want the public to have. So, but yeah, there's always a lot of interest, both from the young, kid in the neighborhood or individual that just likes to, catch something off the stock and keep it in an aquarium for a while, to the people that really like those non-native species, and the more bizarre, the more, desirable they are, and those are the ones who we're really concerned about. Because again, they can't live in these aquariums forever. At some point, they typically, depending on the species, could easily outgrow that, or just people flat out get tired of, taking care of the pet. They don't want it anymore, and unfortunately, a lot of times the most humane thing they think is, oh, just let it go in this ditch or this canal or this lake or whatever, and that's how the problem starts. So
yeah, I think that's the majority. I think unfortunately that's the majority of the case. But like for example, the jewel cichlids, for example, you know, amongst others. But because I know like jewel cichlids, I've seen like rampant. I mean, obviously the Mayan cichlids as well, but I've noticed like jewel cichlids like pretty much in every almost body of water I fished in that's freshwater.
Yeah, and we're seeing the African jewelfish, the Mayan cichlid. Those are two that are really spreading rapidly throughout Central Florida. Again, all they need to do is get into one system, and then if there's canals, ditches, culvert pipes, whatever connected to another public water body, they're going to find their way in there. So we're trying to slow down the spread of non-native species, but also in conjunction with that, just keep people from spreading even native species, because there might be some genetic differences there. A lot of those are really up in the panhandle, but we want to do that statewide just as a good rule of thumb and try to protect the genetic integrity of our native freshwater fish species. So hopefully people will understand that. That is with good reason why we try to want to discourage that and pass laws against that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate your time answering some questions for them, and I'll let you go though. But again, thank you for taking the call.
No problem. It was great talking to you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. So that was good. That hopefully some of y'all were able to find out the reasoning behind, and I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't mentioned much about the fact that the fish are losing its ability to hunt. But the mentioning of the possibility of the fish spreading disease to the water that you released it in. So with that being said, I mean, a lot of y'all, I know like the fish are cool to have, you want to have as a pet and stuff like that, but you gotta understand too that you gotta have a game plan at the end of the day on what you're gonna do with this fish if it like outgrows what you're gonna have it in. Because it's really not going to be fair to that fish, and I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just basically showing empathy and compassion for the fish, because it's not fair to them to be taken out of their waterways and then put into a tank, and then you just like giving up on them. Because it's like, unfortunately, I know like a lot of people that watch this, they're gonna say otherwise about stuff like that, and you're gonna do what you want to do at the end of the day. But that's just how I feel about that stuff, and it was good to hear what they had to say about that stuff as well. But that wraps up this video. Just want to let y'all again know that if you do enjoy the content that I'm trying to put out and stuff like that, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. But anyway, so that's it for this video. I'll see you all hopefully another video out there on the water doing some real fishing content and stuff with the Medi glasses and maybe the GoPro that I have right now. So I'll see y'all soon.